And the first one that really kind of caught my eye was the data that NAR came out with regard to the industry, how many agents are coming on board, how many agents are leaving the industry, which is always something kind of just organically that's been on my mind in terms of, what is this challenging market doing for the agent population? Good morning. Welcome back, everyone, to the Relevant Agent Pod with my co-host, super cool dude, solid guy, buddy, Alex Haig. And I am your moderator, Eddie Arguelles, and welcome back again to the Relevant Agent. Now, we were just kicking around some really good ideas here to talk about this morning, Alex, but how's the day so far?
Good, man. Ready to get rolling. Absolutely. Yeah. Holidays over. Let's go.
Yeah, it's actually sometimes a lot of people get a little slow getting up from the holiday, both personally and professionally, but I think we're ready to go. And I think we've got some really interesting things to chat about today, that are relevant and topical and very current. And the first one that really kind of caught my eye was the data that NAR came out with regard to the industry, how many agents are coming on board, how many agents are leaving the industry, which is always something kind of just organically that's been on my mind in terms of, what is this challenging market doing for the agent population? And then that led me to think about, kind of what is the current demographic of the agents that we currently have serving the public? What is their makeup? But by and large, obviously the last report had to do with the number of people that were actually leaving the industry. Are you seeing that locally here?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We've seen people. I mean, we have a real estate team, so we have people that kind of it's seeming almost like a boot camp thing, or I wouldn't quite call it a Navy SEAL, but some people just don't make it. I think that there's another level of friction that's coming in that people believe and see that they're going to have to work their way through of understanding something new. So I think I've kind of had this theory, and I've seen it actually happen because I've talked to a few older kind of veteran agents that were kind of at the tail end of their career and just said, I'm out. I'm not going to do this whole thing. So I think we're losing some of those people that were on maybe the edge of retirement, if you will. And then I see the newer agents that have kind of been on my team and so forth and in our organization really have struggles with, one part of it is learning what we need to learn. And literally you and I were just talking about the new rules coming out and how you can market properties. And there's just still a lot of unknowns. So it's one thing if you know what you need to learn. It's another thing if you know there's something you're going to need to learn and you don't even know how to operate within the context of those rules. Those rules seem to still keep rolling out. We were just mentioning something about marketing with social media, and it's still unclear. So I think anyways, overarchingly, I think that people are just not wanting to learn something new, both on the new end and on the outgoing end. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. How about yourself?
Yeah, to tie in with that, I definitely see that the having to learn something new is an immediate disqualifier for a good number. Now, it's not a mass exodus because I'm curious to see what the 2024 numbers end up, shaking out to be. But NAR says that the membership fell from 1.58 million in 2022 to 1.55 million in 2023, a 2% decrease, which obviously is not a lot. It isn't a mass exodus, but at the same time, we also know that a lot of the agents, many agents, a good portion are not doing this full time. The average real estate agent or realtor completed 10 transactions in 2023, which is down from 12 in 2022. So again, some of the agents have other jobs or are in a relationship with a second income, and so it's not the primary source of income. So they can float these difficult times and not be a single income, household where everything is relying on the real estate income. And so I think that also keeps the numbers from going too low because the population, it isn't relying on it full time, which is really one of my criticisms, and I think we've kind of touched on this before, is, if you're serving the public, man, you really need to be the best that you can be, right? And you need to be educated and invested in this industry, because you're, again, dealing with someone's maybe greatest asset, greatest purchase, greatest decision that they do over their lifetime in terms of their financial outcome and their financial future. And so to not be as prepared and as astute and as experienced as you can be is why sometimes we get so much criticism as realtors as a whole, is because, there are so many part-timers and there are so many inexperienced. And this circles back to what we're just talking about right now, is if the challenges come up and it makes it more difficult to, be an agent, because now you've got to learn more stuff, if you will, or you've got to now invest in these new rules and how to maneuver them and how to work with them, not around them, of course. That's also a big talking point, not to try to circumvent the new rules. It requires an investment of time and energy. And if you were kind of on the edge because you were just doing this part-time and it wasn't your main gig, that might be another reason why you tap out.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better, man.
Yeah.
It's friction, and people that are a little soft, or I don't know if I would use the word soft, but even for me, and I'm sure for you, like, it's a little frustrating because it's 20 years in and been doing it some way for a long time. And so I can see how these older timers just go, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this. So
yeah, I totally see that too. And they participated in a really good market, leading up to these last couple of years, right? And so if they were good and they're smart, they put some of that away, made some wise investments, and so they really should be good. But certainly someone that just started in the last couple of years has had an uphill battle, and in order to get good, right, and to leverage the industry the way we all believe and have benefited from, for those, again, to your point, that have been in it for so many years. And so that's been a challenge. A couple other stats here. One that was kind of significant here too, to that point, is the typical realtor is 55 years old, a white female.
Wow, I didn't know that stat.
Yeah, the typical realtor is 55-year-old white female homeowner with some college education. I can see that. I was a little surprised by the age. I would have thought it would have skewed a little bit younger.
Yeah,
but
that's average too. So
right.
So then you got a lot of 70-year-olds in there, if that's the average.
Yeah, well, again, that's the industry does allow for that, is one of its benefits. And I certainly thought about when I first started 20 years ago. I was like, man, this is actually something that I could do if I'm really good at it for a long time, because I don't need to run or do anything necessarily youthful. I just need to use my brain and keep it together, and I should be able to accumulate some knowledge that will help people for many, many years. But I also see what you thought. I was like, hey, man, I'm out. I don't want to deal with these changes anymore. It's enough already.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how the numbers come out in 2024. That'll be.
Yeah, I definitely I'd love to see what that ends up looking like. Okay, so as we tie this into some of the, and I chuckled because I shared this with you earlier, the email that came through. I don't know if you saw it from NAR. And the subject line was, the MLS is still the backbone of real estate post NAR settlement. Clearly an indication by the NAR to say, hey guys, we're still very relevant, even though all these rules have come down. And certainly in many respects, it feels like it's aiding in the messaging is aiding in the diminishing of the importance, in my opinion, of the NAR and the MLS specifically as a tool, as a a form where, this is the place you have to be. Because if you break it all down, obviously they highlighted some points as to what the value is of being a realtor, which for those of you who don't know, is a unique designation. Just because you're a real estate agent does not mean that you are a realtor. You must join the National Association of Realtors to be considered and to use the realtor name. And that, with that comes a certain level of commitment to ethics and a way of doing business and holding your business to a standard to serve your clients at the highest standard. And so, that is something that is losing, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, a lot of value. That community is probably one of its last best benefits, but it certainly can't be the tech. To say that the MLS is always going to be the end-all, be-all repository of data, and that's the only way we can aggregate where all the listings live and maintain them there, I think is very short-sighted and comes from a big organization that is so big that it's, they don't want to fail, and it's going to be a very slow boat, and they're never going to say, things could change. I was telling you earlier, I said I would not be surprised if a 23-year-old just popped up tomorrow that came up with the next MLS system or a better way using the technology that's available to us, including things like the blockchain, which I think is certainly a viable portal for replicating something similar, which is basically just a place where we can all have access to and share our data, which again, may not even be our data as much anymore, right? When I used to use that word, it was our data, it was your listings, Alex. It was my listings. And that was my information. Well, now, of course, over the years, it's the public's information now. Everyone has access to it. So that also lessened the stranglehold on the data. But what do you think about the possibility, the real possibility of those the technology improvements every single day at lightning speed now, coming up with the next MLS?
I feel like this is like a watershed moment. It feels like 2005-ish in a way where, NAR gave up the data feed, and that's how the portal sites like Realtor.com and Zillow came in and had this massive disruption. And to your point, like basically NAR gave away the data. Before that, you didn't have these sites that could monetize the data. So this feels like one of those moments where you couldn't see the Zillow come along, you couldn't see the Realtor.com come along. If you did, you could have made a lot of money. But yeah, this is what it feels like. So I guess the question is, you use the word relevant. Maybe they need to come on the podcast. But it's kind of like those. What's the collateral effects, and are they still going to be as relevant? If I was a betting man, I would say no. I would say, to your point, I think somebody's going to figure this out. We don't know exactly at this point what this is because, like to our earlier points, what are the rules? I mean, we were just trying to discern from an email sent out by our local board about how marketing can be done. And we're reading it here. I think I sent that over to you, that they can share in their marketing efforts, such as flyers, signs, or emails. So we actually reached out to the local board and said, hey, does that include social? And they even said, we kind of don't know. I mean, they're in a cover their ass kind of situation, and I get that. That being said, will it be relevant? If you ask my opinion, I'm going to guess not as relevant. We will see how relevant they stay, given what is going to happen here. And again, that's the collateral effects that we kind of don't know. So betting man, I'm going to say no. To what degree? Depends on that 23-year-old. What do they come up with?
Well, listen, do you see any innovation in the NAR over the past 5-10 years? Do you see any real innovation there, or are they just holding on to what they have because it's such a big deck of cards, house of
That's a
cards.
loaded. That's a really loaded question. It seems almost rhetorical the way that you ask it, and I haven't seen them come out with anything. I mean, if we talk about revolutionary, that would be a Zillow, or maybe like a Homes.com, or even Home Light, or some of these referral networks that have aggregated SEO optimization to find people that want to sell, and then they partner with agents on a referral basis. That's pretty kind of disruptive in a way because they were able to get some data. They did stuff on their SEO on their own, but I don't know, man. I
I mean,
just
if we
I
peel
don't
that, if we
haven't
peel
seen, I
that back
haven't
from a
seen.
technical aspect for a moment, and we talk about, what did Zillow do, and all they did was really distribute information in a different format, in what has
Mhm.
obviously been a much better format, a format that the public has
Yeah,
really gotten behind and excited about, found it more convenient, found it whatever it was,
yeah,
right? And obviously expose the information because it used to be behind closed doors. For those of you who don't know, back in the day, it used to actually be a physical book, right? These were books that came out
yep,
with the new listings, and you had to go to your local real estate agent, sit down in their office, and pull out the book, and go through it. And so we were the keepers of data. When we say it was our listings, they really were our listings, much
yeah,
more than we actually can claim today. And so now that when Zillows came around, and the data sharing agreements started to happen between MLSs and the Zillows of the world, Redfins, you name it, are out there and sharing the data. We're no longer the keepers of that data. And so technology has continued to chip away at it. And it goes without saying that, creating the next platform that shares data technically is not a huge endeavor. It's just how do people want to consume it moving forward? And can agents go directly to a newer, faster, more streamlined approach? Because those are the the headline words that people are used to and only going to be continued to look for, which is ease of access, quick information, up to the minute, speed, convenience. And these are the things that we also offer as real estate agents when we take on listings and work with our customers. Hey, when we list your home, it's going to be convenient, it's going to be fast, you're going to get the best service. So it goes without saying that the person, the entity, the company that comes up with a way to follow that mindset and what the consumer wants. That's all we're doing is providing what the consumer wants. Whether it's you or I looking at the face of our potential new listing customer, or the Zillows, the giants of the world, looking at the general public and what does that consumer want. It's the same consumer. They want the same thing. They want the same outcome. They want the same effects. And so my question was, do you think they're innovating? And if I ask myself the same question, I'm like, no, I haven't seen any innovation. I think when you
yeah.
get to a certain size in any organization, you start to play more defense than you play offense. And I think that's something that's probably very likely in this scenario.
Yeah, to kind of put a bow on that, I would say that the organization just really wasn't built as a innovative kind of platform, right? Like it's more of just a membership thing, and MLS, started to develop under NAR, and so they had that data, and then I don't know, somebody sold the realtors down the river. It was like the one thing that really made NAR and the realtors relevant in a way.
And
Part of it
powerful.
was the data, part of it, right? And then they gave that away. So it's almost like you had the one thing that really was your relevance. The agents, of course, have to be able to use it, so you want to be able to build them and so forth. But it's just a different thing, meaning they're just not built as a company like a Google, right? Like that's going to do innovative things with data. I mean, gosh, you look at what was it that just partnered with OpenAI? Apple. I mean, Apple partnered with OpenAI because they couldn't figure out AI fast enough. So, I mean, there's a data company, there's a technology company that had to partner with somebody else to kind of stay relevant in that space. And so back to the question, I haven't seen, to your really good question there. What's the history? Have they done anything innovative? No, and in fact, they kind of squandered the one thing that made them. I hate to keep using the word relevant, but I do believe they kind of gave that away. So I don't know, Bad. We're gonna see here, and I think to both of your point there, I think it's probably going to have something to do with blockchain, something to do with being able to share data, maybe some kind of community tokens. I don't know. My mind goes in a lot of different directions, but anyways, I guess to put a bow on it, I just don't think NAR is built like that.
Do you think the average
to
agent is
be
prepared? You think the average agent is prepared for a real shift in the market? And do you see, how would you potentially think that an agent can position themselves? What should they be doing? What can they do even just themselves individually to prepare for that? Because I've got my thoughts on that, but I'd love to hear yours.
I think you need to, if you can't figure it out just going out there. Let's say you're with, let's put it like this way: you're with a 100% brokerage, right? That doesn't provide a high level of training or service. They're just processing checks. They're probably not going to have masterminds. They're not going to have Zooms. They're not going to have all these meetings to keep people really abreast of what's going on. So you're going to need to do that yourself. If you're smart enough, I think you can figure it out. I don't think this stuff is going to be too crazy. We, part of what we've been doing is training. So back to your point, are they ready? It's like, if you're going to go to war, and I don't mean to say it like that. Let's say, are you going to go to a big championship game? What do? You train every single day on taking pitches and that. And we do that in our morning role play of how to have these conversations and still being organic with how we approach that. Because for our company with EXP, they're not saying, hey, here's your buyer script. They do have them, but we don't really do scripts. We're basically training to say, kind of the old days, Eddie, you mentioned it with the books. People used to actually come into an office and sit down with their counsel, if you will, their trusted advisor that they brought on. They would actually meet with them, and we would go over, here's what I do. Boom, 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 boom. All of these things that I do. And that kind of went away. Frankly, I think even with Zillow, basically just going out and showing property to the first person that gets on the phone. Zillow teaches you, go meet the person at the property, which is what you want to do to build the rapport. When you open that door, it's kind of like insinuating that relationship is starting, but the insinuation didn't have any written agreement. So what we're doing is saying, hey, meet with people either at the property or try to meet with them beforehand to go over, here's the benefits of working with me. So anyways, back to your question, that's what we're doing, but I don't see others doing that. I just don't. So I don't know how egregious or tough these rules are going to end up being. I think I'm going to come back to your muddy middle. It's going to take some time for this to shake out, because what I see happening, if I was to run this in my head as I have before, I see the kind of, when it comes down here, was it August 17th, right?
Yes.
And EXP for us already has said they want to start seeing the buyer broker agreements now as part of the compliance package, which I think is great, like happening before, like, okay, let's not just cram for the test. And as of August 17th, they're actually having us do that now. But anyways, to answer your question, man, I don't see too many actually training into it, but they might just work their way through it. It's not like because I didn't prepare, I'm not going to be able to handle it. But I think the ones that are taking the time to actually drill this and go over these conversations and have actually a plan are going to be much better suited. But anyways, to answer your question, I don't see a lot of people doing that. But
yeah, I think
what
that
do you think?
you made a great point about, back in the day when, we used to actually sit down across from each other at the table and be able to have an opportunity to have a discussion. And that is such a low tech, but still a very valuable component of how we do business, meaning sitting down with the person, really getting to know them, and building the rapport. There is no replacement for that in-person rapport building and the sales skills of building that relationship, right? And asking all the right questions and qualifying them and setting expectations. All of those are so foundational and so important. And at the risk of sounding like the old guy, I still believe that those are, incredibly, again, to use, boy, we really picked a good word for this podcast, very relevant skills, right? Those are really important things to be able to still master. Now, in today's day and age, of course, now we're able to use other tools, which I know you and I are big proponents of, and we use on the regular, which is digital strategies, social media, video content. All of those things have been the latest replacement, if you will, or filler for not having that in-person relationship, and be able to create inside the world that we live in, to create content that gets ahead of everyone. So it's educational content that, all of a sudden I'm seeing Alex on YouTube, and I'm paying attention to what he's doing, and he's giving me really good advice. By the time I do physically sit down with him or shake his hand at that new house that we're going to take a look at, I already feel like I know him, right? And so, and I love that, part of the goal for our channel, of course, too, is to share a lot of those really specific strategies about how to do that, how to leverage those tools, because it is the way. And I think that's kind of, if we're talking to our target viewer that's kind of in our age, in our experience, and didn't grow up with this stuff, kind of mentality, right? But wants to leverage it, understands that it's not a gimmick, and wants to leverage, specific digital marketing strategies. We're definitely going to be sharing those with you. So definitely stay tuned. But I think that's kind of the way things have morphed into, and I think it's going to be even more so. So getting yourself comfortable with and aligning yourself with the leadership, like with your team and everything you do with your team and how you consistently train them. Those skills, back to your point, is going to be really important. And I think those that don't have that kind of leadership or access to those kinds of thoughts and strategies are going to be in a disadvantage. I think the lone wolf brokerage, or the lone wolf mentality, where you just were 100% and didn't really have any support, is going to become more challenging with the new rules that are coming down. And if it's any indication, there's just going to be more rules and more pressure put down on us from other directions, which continue to degrade, I think, the value of the NAR and the old format. What do you think?
Yeah. I ultimately think, like, we've been masterminding on this every Thursday for an hour and a half for the last 7 weeks. I'm just not seeing others do it. And we're going to see. There's so much pontification that can happen here, but at the end of the day, we're gonna see. It's almost like I wish there was a higher level of, and that's the problem. Kind of the problem with our industry is that there just isn't the continuity of training. It's like if you worked for Walmart or you worked for McDonald's or whatever, it's like you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. This is the way that you change the toilet paper in the bathroom type deal. It's just not like that in our industry. It's a very, you mentioned the word lone wolf. There's a lot of lone wolves out there that are agents, and there's, frankly, some lone wolf brokerages. It seems like. I just think that we're not fully prepared, but we'll see.
Yeah, you're right. You're bringing up a really good point. We are pontificating. We are making a lot of I'd like to think on our pod that we're making a lot of educated guesses based on our experience, right? But time will tell. We'll see how this plays out. Many times in history, you can look back and see that we overthought it. It wasn't nearly as tragic, difficult, life-changing as we maybe originally thought. The sky is not necessarily falling. But if history is any indication as well, you do tend to think that things are going to change, and you got to think that an establishment that's been around for so long in the relatively same format is ripe for the pickings. And I love technology. I don't think it's the end all be all. I think that mastering the human skills is also incredibly important. But I do see change, and I'm excited for it. And that's kind of on a personal level why I always like to pay attention to this stuff. And I know you're very similar as well. I'd like to pay attention to this stuff because even though we may hear 10, 15, 24 different options of what could happen, at least we're prepared, right? And we're able to kind of rifle through those and be like, you know what, these 7 or 8 are really pretty likely. And just to be able to be prepared and start to think in that direction, I think that's what makes us, what's given us longevity in the industry. And I believe that's also what gets us, ahead of things in this industry as well, just as entrepreneurs and business owners, because those are the skills I think you really need to have in order to be successful as someone who decides to work for themselves and build out their own roadmap of life. So it's to your point.
You mentioned one thing. Sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah.
About history, and so just kind of coming back about disruption and history within our industry. So I would say that one big disruption as far as NAR giving away the data in 2005 for the realtors was a very disruptive thing, but it didn't affect us the way that kind of this is. It just kind of, it affected the way that the data was disseminated to the community. Now, the other thing that happened, I think it was 2008, 2009, or 9, I think, or 10, when Dodd-Frank came out, whatever year that was, we were having conversation in our mastermind. So it helps the agents to, just all be kind of, okay, here's where we're at. Here's the known knowns. Here's the known unknowns. And then, gosh, the unknowns are what we speculate about. But when Dodd-Frank came in, we have some members of the team that actually were in the mortgage industry. And they said it was like, they were freaking out. Kind of, I think, how people are a little bit freaking out right now. And I was talking with them. Some people left the business because they were just like, I'm enough. I don't want to do it this way. We did HUDs. Now we're doing closing disclosures. All this stuff has to happen beforehand and all these new rules. And it was like this thick, of course, Dodd-Frank. So they're extra freaking out. Like, oh my God, I got to learn, I got to become a doctorate in this or whatever. And so anyways, the point is that it was a little bit of a struggle for the first couple of months. And then it was like, oh, that's the way it works. And it kind of just slid right in. Some things changed, but not enough to be, I don't know, warrant, I guess, people leaving the business unless they were just looking for a reason to leave, and that was a good reason for them. But I think Dodd-Frank, it was great to hear the folks that had been in mortgage and kind of a similar sentiment of like, whoa, what is all this new stuff? We did it this way for all this time. We're so used to it, and now you're going to throw this total monkey wrench into the whole thing and disrupt and turn it upside down. But it worked its way out. So I'm hoping that it's going to be something similar in this, that there's this quasi freak out. It's like going to the doctor and you're just so scared to get the shot, and then you get the shot and you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. So
Yeah, I think it's similar.
like that.
I think it's similar also to, a similar viewpoint or a case study would be, someone trying to sell their house on their own, a private sale or a for sale by owner, right? Why would anybody need a realtor? You don't to transact a piece of real estate, but it's a percentage, and it remains a percentage, and it's been a percentage. It's a small portion of the people that actually transact real estate are doing it privately on their own, or a for sale by owner that does advertise it to the public. But why has that not taken off? Because you can do it and save the commission. Well, it's because people still rely on the expertise. And so, if we use that lens moving forward, there's still going to be value in whatever form we end up creating a relationship with the public. There's still value in a couple of guys like us that know what they're doing to help them buy or sell one of the largest assets that they will ever accumulate in their life. Just in the same way you need any other professional, you leverage their talents and their skills because they've done it 843 times and you've only done it once or twice or three times. How astute are you going to be compared to them? That's a really overarching thought that I have. I'm going to be better equipped. Alex is going to be better equipped than I, individual member of the public, homeowner, to navigate this. And is it worth X amount of dollars to me to use their skills? The answer is going to be yes. Alex is always going to be better at it than I, that I've only sold the house 2 or 3 times. And so the value is there. How the value is perceived, how much value, are they paying us in Bitcoin? Are they paying us $8? Are they paying us $8 million? Whatever that ends up looking like, there's a value exchange for the services we provide. And the better you are at it, the more relevant you are, the more astute and value-driven you are, that's going to equate to the money you make. And that's always been the case, right? There's some agents out there that do it for 1%. There's agents that provide very little service. And there's ones that hold firm to a higher percentage amount. And that's what they're worth. And their customers are happy to pay it because they are worth it. You can buy your groceries at the dollar store. Nothing wrong with that. But you can also buy your groceries at the fresh market. Completely different experience, maybe a very different product, but we have options. And the minority still chooses the for sale by owners and private sales, and the vast majority still need and want and desire and are willing to pay for the counsel of someone who's got their act together.
Yeah. You mentioned, I wrote down a couple things. The first broker I worked for, one of the things he said was it's never a problem until it's a problem. And I didn't fully understand that until I started going through life. And it's like the problems that you don't see coming are sometimes the worst ones. To that person that goes out and can say, hey, this looks easy and I want to go do this because I'm going to save commission. It looks easy like a lot of things until you do it. Golf might look easy until you pick up a club. And then you're like, whoa, this is not quite as easy as I thought it was. I'll leave it on this, that back to the training and that, and you mentioned value a couple of times. I think that just before, agents didn't have to the degree that I think they're going to have to be able to articulate their value, right? It's like that old saying, like, value unarticulated is value unappreciated. And if you're not able to articulate your value in what you do, and that's what we're training on now, is meet in the office, like sit down with these people and get hyper clear with them, because one of the things here, the buyer agreement is going to have to be signed. And that's the part where I think it's going to get flushed out, where maybe in the beginning there's going to be, Zillow has this form. I don't know if your company's going to allow you to use it, but you get like a one showing form, right? So somebody's not going to have a problem signing that. Okay, I need to sign this just to see this property. Sure. But once that becomes a different document and there's actually a relationship and an agency, I guess, if you will, that's established, that's where that value is really going to need to be able to be articulated. That's where I see it kind of breaking down, is that agents don't have that value proposition built, first of all. Second of all, even if they have something that's come down from their brokerage, are they really training on it? If it's a new program, whether I don't care whether you're writing code or you're learning to play golf or whatever, you've got to train. You've got to learn, how to deploy whatever it is, grip or code or whatever it is. You've got to learn something new, and that takes time and drilling. That's what I'm seeing not happen on twofolds. There isn't anything standard as far as here's the value that I provide, and there isn't a training that's ongoing that's happening with that. And so it's not a problem until it's a problem. We'll see once the time comes. I was going to kind of leave this side note of thought that I've had. In the beginning, is there going to be people that will just show a bunch of properties. I'll write out, just properties that we're going to see, and we just go by that. Maybe they're going to skirt the whole system because it's easy for somebody to sign that because it's not a big obligation on their part to, commit themselves to that agent. So in the beginning, there might be agents that are just willing to go and show a bunch of properties for a one-time showing agreement. Until they start to get burned, they don't make any money, and now they're out because they never learn to actually sit down and go, we're entering into an agreement with you and me for a certain amount of time. You're not going to use anybody else. I think that a lot of people are avoiding that because it's a little uncomfortable. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah,
Again,
for those who haven't established that type of rapport, or that type of system or process before, it is going to be uncomfortable, right? Because you mentioned earlier in our conversation about, kind of flying by the seat of their pants analogy in terms of, you called me, I'll meet you, and I'll show it to you. And the expectation, as, a word similar that you use, or expectation was that, that they were your customer, provided we gave good service and you were on time and, followed up well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The expectation was that they were your customer. You guys liked each other. You hit it off just fine. You understood each other. They were likely your customer. But there were some also too, as because I've seen in the comments in the networking groups that I belong to, hey, I've been doing this since day one. I've always had a buyer's agent agreement, and it always so for me it's no big deal. And that is something that, to the industry's credit, has always said you should have a buyer's agent agreement. But the vast majority didn't really use it because it wasn't a problem until it was a problem. And now it's a mandate, not so much a problem. We'll see what the problems arise. Yeah. But that's the advice for the agents. If we turn this a little bit now and we stay obviously inside the world of real estate that we're in right now and the challenges that exist from the view of the buying and selling public, there is a lot of uncertainty. We've looked at some of the metrics, we looked at some of the data. We understand that although prices have not, it's this funky market that we have. The prices really haven't come down. And certainly here in Florida, we still have the aura of a desirable place to live. I think that will always be, regardless of kind of what the market is doing, just because of the geographic attributes and desirability that exists here. But what do you say to the buyers and sellers right now that are kind of on the fence because prices are high still, interest rates are still high, but sales are really low because of those two things, and there's this uncertainty as to kind of where the market's going. For the last couple, 2-3 years, people say, oh, the market's going to crash, market's going to crash. It hasn't. There isn't, if there's any indication that it's going to anytime soon. And again, we're shielded a little bit because we're Florida, but regardless, let's talk about the whole country. It just really hasn't happened. There's pockets, there's areas, there's victims in some areas, in some markets, and I mean victims as in certain products, new construction, certain neighborhoods, these kinds of things that have fallen. But by and large, that's not the case. What kind of conversation are you having? Because my biggest thing coming up in the industry has always been, I don't want to sell you on anything. I'm here to be a steward. I'm here to be your help and your advisor, your trusted advisor to help you through this process. If that's what you want to do, let's figure out if it's the right thing for you. And I'm going to give you my knowledge and expertise and my take on why it may or may not be a good idea to do what you're thinking about doing. But right now, yes, people need to sell real estate in order to make a commission, but I still lean back on that ethos and say, I don't want to pressure you into anything, and I don't want to sound like a salesperson to you. I want to really still give you good advice, and if we shake hands and you're not ready until the next year or so, that's perfectly fine. I'll be here then too. What are those conversations like for you and your team right now, and how are you handling those to not come off as a pushy salesperson, especially in an environment that we have right now with so much uncertainty?
It's a good question. I think it comes down to the training again. Every day we're not teaching scripting of if they say this, you say this. I think that can come across as that person that's that pushy person. Like they've always got an answer for whatever it is that you say that seems to be moving you down the line so that you buy. The way that we approach it is, and again, like what ultimately, why do we do things with someone else? Usually it has to do with trust. You mentioned it, right? Your trusted advisor. Why are you going to take somebody's advice? Well, you trust them. So a part of the aspect of building trust is building rapport. And, there's a lot of different ways to do that. But the best way to do it is to ask people really good questions. So we don't ask questions that are leading questions into trying to trap somebody into doing something that they don't really want to do. What we're trying to do is ask a lot of questions to say, hey, I care about you. I genuinely care about you, and I want to show you that because that's who I am, not because I'm showing you that because I want to get paid. I'm showing you this because I genuinely care. I always say to people, whether it's a month, 3 months, I'm not really much in production anymore, but hey, look, as long as it takes, I'm here with you. I'm loyal. I'm not going to try to push you into anything. I'm going to just continue to ask you, in my opinion, good questions. So my ultimate philosophy is, and I think we're very Contigo in this, is that real estate is a good asset to own. For the everyday average Joe, it's probably one of the best ways to actually unscrew your future. And I was going to use Raoul Paul's un-F your future. But your future can be a little effed if you're not buying assets. And we've talked about this before, going a little bit sideways under monetary policy. There's more dollars that are being created. That's what inflation is. As Milton Friedman said, it's the money stupid. Anybody that doesn't understand what inflation is, and I'm not saying anybody's stupid if they don't, but it's just the increase of inflating, as simply like inflating the money supply. So there's more dollars, same goods, so those goods cost more. So back to my point, in the context of that, the only way to keep up with that inflation is purchasing something that runs at least in parity with that inflation. And I mean, they're talking the Fed's target rate is 2%. They're now at 3 point something percent, according to CPI, which is a whole nother ball of wax talking about inflation. But it's really the only way in my heart of hearts. So it's like, am I really trying to help somebody? Is what I'm trying to move towards in my profession, do I believe in it? Yes. So we're asking really, really good questions that unpack and uncover whether or not somebody, and I'm doing actually a video on it, spoiler alert. I think only the two reasons, which I kind of started to just unpack it. I'm like, well, what are the reasons not to buy? Well, genuinely, because I hear them. You brought up interest rates, uncertainty, election, all that stuff, right? Okay. Well, and I just said, okay, let's come from first principles. Is there ever a reason not to buy? So the two things that I actually came up with, Eddie, were one, if you know you're going to move within a year. I was like, okay, if you know you're going to move within a year, our average appreciation, I think, is, 3 point something percent. And that's over Case-Shiller, 60 years, right? Not you hit a year like 2004 to 2006 and you see a 70% appreciation. Like you hit a black swan during the pandemic. You hit another black swan where you had, as a collective in those couple of years, 60%, 65% appreciation, which are black swanish weird events. But back to my point. So if you caught in one of those years, which if you can plan that out, let me know. I would love to know when these things are going to happen, Eddie, so that, we get this 30% appreciation and I'll just go leverage myself to the hilt and buy every piece of real estate I can. But that aside, it's hard to know when those things are going to happen. So I think if you know you're going to move within a year, and there's maybe even something in there where you might still want to buy because you're going to get the tax write-off and so forth, and maybe you're going to rent it out. But if you were going to sell it and you didn't want to be a landlord, probably if you knew you were going to move within a year, you're not going to get enough appreciation to make up for the closing cost in and the closing cost out. it might still be a wash depending, on how much money you leverage for what your interest is and what you can write off, and talk to your accountant about that. But so that was the first one. The second one was, and I'd like your opinion on both these as we always kind of talk about these subjects, but I think if you don't have like maybe 3 to 6 months of reserves, might not be a good time to buy. Like mufflers go on cars, unless you got Tesla, buddy, then, you don't have a muffler. But, so mufflers go, the kid needs braces, whatever. If stuff happens, the water heater goes or whatever, you should get a home warranty to, shore up AC units or water heater episodes. But I think those are my two. So as we ask a lot of questions and we flush out, hey, maybe you don't have the money as reserves. Maybe, you're looking to maybe move in a year. But I think outside of that, Eddie, I think, and I'm doing the video, I think the title is going to be Always a Good Time to Buy Stupid Things That Realtors Say.
That's a great title.
So I don't think it's always. I don't think it's always, but I would say in most cases, you got to be thinking about how can I buy, not why I shouldn't buy. To me, those are the two reasons why you shouldn't buy. And you can work on the second one, getting 3 to 6 months of reserves up. You can work on that. If you have a job transfer, is coming up in a year, you're obviously not going to be able to work on that. But anything else, man, like you got to figure out a way to buy, because back to my point about inflation, you're going to get crushed by inflation. And, buying a house with all the tax advantages and all that are in there help you to un-F your future in that regard.
Yeah, another way of phrasing it is a hedge against inflation, right? This is your kind of your pushback, your protection, your shield against the unstoppable monster that is inflation, and that's going to continue. So whether it's real estate or other assets, the idea is to have an asset, to your point, that is always fighting against the uphill battle against inflation, which is going to continue to happen. And I love that, man. I love that reframing. I love that you mentioned the fact that you actually gave some timeline there in terms of, should I be buying, someone who's thinking about buying in the short term or owning for a short term, a year or less, or even up to 2 years. And I would obviously even 3-4 years, right? I think the shorter the time frame, the more thoughtful you need to be about the economics and really sharpening your pencil and writing it down. Okay, if I stay here, I only own it for this amount of time. What can happen? It could go up or it can go down. What is it kind of like? You have to be more sensitive, or you will be more sensitive to those changes, right? To the market changes, to the market fluctuations. As to what could or couldn't happen to you, and what are you doing on the other end with that investment? Are you leveraging it for something else? You're trying to do something with it. A lot more specific work needs to happen in order to make sure that that's a smart decision. Really, at any time, whether it's in today's market or 20 years ago or 20 years from now, I think that shorter the time frame, the more thoughtful you need to be about making that decision. I think for most people that are looking to buy their first home, yes, to your point earlier, is they're maybe not as astute. They could really use the services of a competent real estate agent. It's more about having a roof over their head, having a place to call their home, to raise their family, if that's what they choose to do, and to ride off into the sunset with that asset for 20, 30, 40 plus years. And for that person, that's where I get romantic about home ownership, because I think it's such a great way to hedge against. This is your asset. This is the one vehicle for most people that are not as astute, that aren't trying to play the market, aren't trying to look for other things. They're just salt of the earth people, working hard every day, and buying their home, raising their family, and doing all the wonderful things that this country affords us to do. I think that is probably the majority of the people that we serve. And for them, talk to someone, figure out when is the right time to do it, what kind of home, what's going to be best suited, look at the pros and cons. Maybe it is the ugly starter home, but you realize that you're also handy, and over the course of 5, 7, 10 years, that 200, there's no such thing anymore as $200,000 home, but that ugly duckling at 400,000, or what's our average right now, 425, something like that, ends up
Martin,
being,
yeah.
yeah, a $700,000 home in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. And all you did was a handful of trips to Home Depot, you put a new roof on it, and you lovingly cared for it, and it served as your shelter for you and your family to thrive. That is beautiful. And then you leapfrog into the next home, right? As your family changes or your needs change. And then you sell that big house. It's now worth $1.4 million after 30 years. And, you buy that little condo on the water with your wife. I don't know. That seems to be something that plays out more and more. And so that real estate vehicle is the vehicle. You did nothing else but punch in and punch out at your 9 to 5. You guys were good stewards with your money. You're always putting a little money away, doing the things, having your vacations. I think by and large, that's probably the customer that we serve. And those are the ones I love to serve, because I always say, and I say this to young kids too, and I say it to my girls too. I said, listen, if you can accumulate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 properties over your lifetime and hold on to them, by the time you're ready to retire or do whatever you want to do, you're going to be okay. You really are going to be okay. And it's not a huge ordeal or challenge to do that, to accomplish that, when you're partnered or aligned with someone who knows, how to do that. And so that kind of ties into kind of real estate agent 2.0, right? That agent that really is a steward, not only to help you buy or sell a house, but actually help you craft potentially a portfolio of properties. So all this to say that obviously real estate remains that asset, remains that powerful asset class that can help you really live a wonderful life. There are other opportunities, and depends on what your interests are, but I think by and large, real estate is the most accessible for most.
So I think that's such a great point. What comes up for me, and I love that you're teaching your daughters that, man. And I hope they listen. I hope they listen.
I hope they
'Cause what
listen to
comes up for
leveraging
me,
time, because that's the other great component, right? Is time.
yeah,
It is
yeah,
starting now at 20.
and gosh, man, it's like that Mark Twain thing. Like, it, it's it's an old statement, but like, youth is wasted on the young, right? And myself, I did it. My dad said to me exactly what you were saying to your daughters. He said, Alex, if there was one thing that I look back, there was a couple things that he said. You look back. His biggest thing was, don't do what I say. Do what I say, not what I did. Always learn from my mistakes. That was one of the things he told me at a very, very young age, because he made a lot of mistakes, 3 divorces. So, but the other thing that he said, and I remember him saying it, man, and I could have done it. I could have done it, Eddie. He said, buy a house a year. He said, it might sound hard. He said, but you'll figure it out. You'll run across things, which I have now more that my eyes have opened up. I'm actually closing on a flip today, my second one for this year, because I finally got some guts up to do it. I've ran across so many opportunities over the years of people that just wanted to sell, didn't want to list, and were willing to sell it for less. And I didn't move for it. And there was a couple of big deals too, an owner financing. Do you know the Sierra Apartments, on a side note? You know what those are? I'm just talking about deals, and I'll probably do a YouTube video on deals that I passed on. It was, I could have got 10 of those units. And for you, those of you out there, like, these are the deals that will potentially come across your plate. And you got to have that mindset that it might be a little tough to work my way through this. There might be a little bit of risk. Hedge your risk. Make sure that you have those reserves. I'm not saying to just go be hyper cavalier and go out and buy a bunch of houses. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying, I love what Eddie said. Sharpen your pencil. Know what your numbers are. Anyways, this opportunity came across me, and for owner financing, I could have bought 10 Sierra units for $14,000 a piece.
Wow.
And those units were rent. I know. It's really. Anyways, my point is,
The rent would have paid
that
him off in 6 months.
oh, dude, I've run the math. It makes me queasy. But anyways, the point is, I'm just kind of illustrating that if I did buy a house a year, I would be set right now. I mean, I'm pretty good right now, and both of us have made some pretty good investments in our businesses and in assets and so forth. But I would be really set. So I could have done it, and I think that's great advice. And one of the other little pieces, and I'll spin it back to you, was I love that you brought up, I think what a lot of people where they get hung up on is that they can rent, or like, oh, a friend's letting me stay in the house, so I get this lower amount for rent, or we rent something for this amount and it's a nice house and my wife likes it and we like it and blah, blah, blah. But if I was to go and buy, oh God, that's what I'm going to have to live in. And it's like, you know what I mean? You're talking about that ratty property. You're going to have a little bit of that friction, a little bit of, hey, we're not going to have all the bells and whistles that we want, but what is the first principle? If the first principle is to protect oneself against inflation, renting is not doing that. So being in that nice house with the granite and all of the other little things that you like about the property, and then if you were to buy, it's like, oh, I'm not going to get 4 or 5 of those things and I'm going to have to deal with that. It's like, yeah, but the first principle is you're going to thank yourself when you're older and not kick yourself and say, I wish I'd listened to Eddie or Alex or my dad or whomever. It's like, I love that you're teaching your daughters that and you build those good relationships with them. And so they have come from that place of trust. But yeah, man, I really hyper believe in real estate. I believe in buying other assets and so forth. But I think the thing is, maybe I'll spill it back to you. Is there anything that like you want to say overarchingly on that?
No, I mean, the same way. It's always a risky thing. And listen, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. I'm in this business because I do believe in real estate. I do believe in the power of real estate. I do believe in its ability to lift people out of economic difficulty or challenges from their history, from their family. I believe it to be a vehicle to do that. I'm first generation here. My parents moved here from Mexico, first of the family to be born to the States. And I've leveraged this wonderful country in so many different ways. I've enjoyed it. I've contributed. I've given back to it. I've built businesses. I've hired people. I've paid salaries. All of these wonderful things, which allow me to be very proud of where I live and what I do. But you really want to be able to help people with knowledge, and I still like to do that now. I mean, I know some stuff. So whether it's talking to my daughters or talking to the young couple that are thinking about buying real estate or anyone really, my nieces and nephews in Mexico that, didn't get the chance to come here. Now that they're not thriving or doing well, but it's a different perspective. It's a different life, right? There are some advantages certainly of being inside this country. And so, be able to go back to them and say, hey, have you tried this? And obviously technology in the world that we live in now allows us to be so much closer, right? We're not really that separated anymore. The ability to have conversations and share thoughts. But to your question, I love the vehicle of real estate. I think it's incredibly empowering. I share it with my girls, but it's always at the risk, because I am passionate about it, it's always at the risk of sounding like a salesperson. And that's always kind of been my thing, right? And it's like, I don't want to try to feel like I'm convincing you or twisting your arm into something so I can make a buck. That's not the case. And thankfully, to your point earlier, we're not in a position where we have to do that. We don't have to do that. I don't have to sell you anything. But how wonderful is it to be able to really come from a good place and say, I know these things, and it's probably going to help you. And again, these are conversations that I have with my kids. And you're right. I mean, the youth, you hear it, they're smart, they intellectually understand what you're saying, but they may not decide to pull that lever today. And you're right. I think by and large, and I've taken the very specific pleasure of meeting with older people more recently in my last 5-6 years, where I have conversations with them, because it's like, what have you learned, or what have you regretted? What have you wish you did? Those sit downs and those conversations are very helpful for them. They love those. They're very appreciative of that. And that gives me, it gets me right in the feels, which is great because you love to do for others. But on a selfish perspective, I learned so much. I learned so much from them and their perspective. And to be able to share those things, like those wonderful conversations with your dad and conversations I had with my parents too, to have that insight from people who genuinely care about you. You know that you're only getting the good stuff from them, right? And with no ulterior motives in most healthy relationships, of course, right? There, it's so invaluable, and that's just kind of, I'm constantly looking for the wordsmithing, really, to reach who I want to reach with a certain message. And so in this example, my daughter's like, I'm always, when do I say it? What are they going through right now? Did they just learn something that if I key this in with what they just learned right now, they'll get it, the light bulb will go on at that moment. It's like looking for that exact path and exact time, because I want it to land and I want it to reach them. And I'd be like, oh, now I see what he means. And I'd love to be able to make that happen sooner than later because of time, right? And because if we're talking about real estate specifically, or really any assets, time is your friend. The longer you hold it, the better off. And the better you are at just kind of sitting back and letting the markets do what the markets want to do, and just be diligent and subscribe to the fact that over time, this is going to pay off. And so, yeah, that's the overarching kind of thought that I have around investing in real estate and for others. But I love it specifically for the younger set, because I think if you do it a couple, 2, 3 times, I mean, how wonderful if you did it every single year. Oh my gosh, that would have been just unbelievable. And we know that it just steamrolls from there, right? Because now you've got 10 or 5 or whatever, the ability to leverage those to do the next 5 or 10. You could actually buy those 10, right, at one shot. Then it really gets nutty. So yeah, that's why I'm passionate about it. So hopefully anybody who's listening to this, whether you're an agent or a consumer, we're out there. A lot of us give a shit. You can bleep that out. And we want the very best for you. And we're in a position now in our lives and our businesses where we can wholeheartedly say that.
Yeah. I'll leave on the last point to that, just a thought that came up. One of the things that we try to do, and I think it's for anybody, like nobody wants to be told, nobody wants to be schooled. I think we're very experiential. Some of us learn very tactile wise of doing, but we learn from seeing, from experiencing things. And so what we try to do is show people in that video that I'm going to do. If you look at equities, gold, real estate, all of them, the value go left to right and up. And so if you look back on history, and this is the crazy thing and this is what I hear now of, everything's so expensive, right? And it's like, yeah. And it's only going, do you believe that's going to continue? I guess that's another, man, we're kind of at the end of the podcast here, but like, is that going to continue? Is the inflation of everything going to continue? And if it will, let's just say it will, which I think they're going to keep printing, I don't think that's going to stop. Then it's going to continue to go up and to the right. So even if things look really expensive right now, maybe just need to, back to my point before, kind of go, okay, maybe I forego the countertops or that extra bathroom or whatever so that I can get into this. Because that thing that I want looks so expensive. It's like, well, then get into what's affordable to you. Again, back to Eddie, sharpen your pencil. But you just got to get into something. And then to your point, then it'll be the next one and the next one. And then I love, you're saying then the magic really happens. You can start to leverage and move some things around to get more assets. So
there's
we try to show people, man.
Yeah, there's just so much. Exactly. You just try to show people. But I love that point. I think it's really, I think, lost on a lot of people that they think that, it's going to come back down. And then come back down and do what? Come back down and stay? it's going to, oh, this is just a temporary thing. The houses aren't always going to be $400,000. They're going to come back to what they were, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, back to 250. Okay, what if it did? Do you think there's going to stay there? It's probably because some, some crisis happened, something out of the ordinary happened, and they're back down to 250 temporarily. But do you really think that we're going to go back to the normal? Like it's going to be 250 and it's going to be 250 for the next 50 years? Is that what you're thinking? I mean, you can't possibly think that. So will there be blips along the way because of things that happen? Absolutely. But will that $400,000 house end up being $1 million house? The answer is yes. And we've talked about some of those things. And let's leave it on that. Let's leave it on talking about inflation and its impact on real estate and your decision making, whether to buy or sell, and some of the fears involved around that. I think it would be great to unpack that. But as always, if you love this content, if you love what Alex and I are talking about, if you want to stay tuned as we continue to grow and develop the Relevant Agent podcast, we'd love you to come on board. Please make sure to like this and to subscribe if it's content that you enjoy, because we're committed to really breaking things down and giving it to you in a way that it's helpful not only for you as an agent, but also for our consumers that are looking to buy and sell real estate. Have the strategies in place so you can learn, grow, and thrive. And that's what we do here on the Relevant Agent podcast. My friend, thank you as always, and we'll see you all on the next one.